So my name, again, is Terry Helton. I wanted to save this for the presentation. I didn't want to say it in front of everybody, but I'm from Southeast Wisconsin, so by default, that kind of makes me a Packer fan. So Pastor Shaber and I have been able to share that in our numerous conversations. Thank you for the support. So I greatly appreciate that you guys showed up today. This is an exciting opportunity. I do serve as the Deferred Christian Giving Counselor for the WELS. It's very much the case that I am a non-traditional called worker. Okay, I actually spent the last 30 years in the emergency medical services, both in the field as a paramedic and in administration. So I served our kingdom in that capacity for a number of years, kind of involuntarily retired when we sold our company. And a couple of years ago in January of 2023, the WELS Conference of Presidents called me to be the Christian Giving Counselor for Michigan in the North Atlantic District. And it's an exciting opportunity. I'm not a lifelong WELS member. I actually became a WELS member when my parents put me in the grade school when I was in second grade. And it's because of the school that my faith is where it's at. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to serve you guys today. I did attend one of our area Lutheran high schools. I went to Bethany Lutheran College in Mankato, Minnesota, which is an ELS college. It's in Minnesota, so they're kind of Viking fans over there. So that was an interesting experience. I got my bachelor's degree from a college called Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and a master's degree from Loyola University, Chicago. I am married. My wife and I never had any kids. Our kids have 4 paws. We have 2 golden retrievers. This is the 5th and 6th golden retriever of our marriage. We have Gracie, who's 4, and Sophie, who's 2. I get the privilege of traveling around Michigan and the North Atlantic District, talking to people about smarter ways to give to the kingdom. I'm not going to encourage you to give more. I'm going to encourage you to give smarter. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So why do we plan our giving? Well, we like to encourage folks to write a Christian preamble. That's a statement of faith that you put in your end-of-life document that says, I was a believer in Jesus. Now that you're reading this, it's evident that I'm in home with my Lord. I'd like you to be there too. It's a witness to your faith. We also plan our giving to take care of our family, don't we? To make sure that we have an orderly transfer of assets to our heirs. And then we also plan our giving to make end-of-life gifts to the kingdom. We've supported the kingdom through our life. Why shouldn't we make an end-of-life gift to the Lord's kingdom? The role of a Christian giving counselor. Well, our first job is to listen to you, to hear what your plans are, to hear what the Lord has put on your heart to do. We help your family manage the blessings that God gave you. We represent your church. We represent Holy Trinity. By the way, I'm a member of a congregation called New Life Lutheran Church. And the longer you listen to me, the longer you'll start to understand that I'm just a little bit different in a lot of ways, shape, and form. Again, retired paramedic. My wife's a retired 911 dispatcher. So we like to say that we put the fun in dysfunctional. Okay? But our job is to hear your plans. What we are not is professional advisors. We're not tax accountants. We're not financial planners. We're not insurance agents. Our role is to help you formulate your plans so that you can work with your professional advisors and come up with a way to invest in the kingdom that works for you and for the kingdom. So before we get going, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the ministries that we celebrate together. So Pastor was excitedly shared with you that yesterday you guys were assigned a gal from MLC to teach grades 3 and 4. Congratulations on that. It's a tremendous blessing. Our called workers, the training schools have been training less and less students lately because there's just less and less students to go through the programs. Martin Luther College started the year with 614 students, down a little bit. Historically, they used to be 750. I was talking to your principal briefly yesterday. His class was over 1,000. So, our training is down just a little bit. So they're trying to do some creative things at Martin Luther College. They have a program called competency-based education. That's an opportunity for individuals who don't have a degree in teaching, or maybe have a degree in a different field, to take online classes for 2 years to get Synod certified, to get certified as teachers. So that's a non-traditional way. Martin Luther College and the Synod is also very cognizant about debt. So they have a program at Martin Luther College called the Congregational Partnership Grant Program. It's an opportunity for individuals to get a matching grant from their home congregation and from Martin Luther College. This year it's $2,900 to defray tuition. Any of you guys ever heard of a secular publication called the Wall Street Journal? Something that maybe you've seen from time to time. It's been probably a little bit active lately with all the fun things that are happening in the market. 2024, the Wall Street Journal named Martin Luther College is the best career prep college in the country. A secular publication, the Wall Street Journal. Some of the individuals that graduate from Martin Luther College go to a place that Pastor Chambers is familiar with called Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary. Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary has, as of right now, 147 students. Now, the class levels at the seminary are a little different from traditional colleges. You know, traditional colleges have freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years. Not the seminary. The seminary has junior, middler, vicar, and then senior. So the junior class is pretty strong at 47. The senior class is a little bit lighter at 25. So they're probably going to be extending, I heard 24 calls this year for pastors. According to the Synod, as of right now, we are 156 pastors short. So we're graduating 24, that's still going to leave us about 132 pastors short. Got to do some non-traditional things in that respect. You guys ever hear of something called the Pastoral Studies Institute? I know Pastor has. It's an alternative way for education for the seminary, for individuals to study their first couple of years under a local pastor. Many of these gentlemen aren't even in the country. And then that leads them to being able to go on to the seminary. So a lot of exciting opportunities happening there. Continuing education for our pastors, mentors for our new pastors, retreats for pastors who have hit ministry milestones of 3 years, 10 years, 25 years, and 35 years. So lots of good things happening there. We have 2 prep high schools, Michigan Lutheran Seminary over here in Saginaw and Luther Preparatory School over in Wisconsin. They both have the same purpose, to train individuals to go into the teaching and preaching ministry at Martin Luther College. So I serve as the liaison to Michigan Lutheran Seminary because I serve the Michigan district. And President Lutzel is a great guy, dedicated to his ministry. I'm sure you'll agree, Pastor. Just very dedicated to the ministry of Michigan Lutheran Seminary. Tells me that about 40 to 50% of his graduating class of the seniors will go to Martin Luther College. Luther Preparatory School is a little larger. They started the year off with about 415 students. Still, maybe 50% plus go to Martin Luther College. So it's a great way for them to get trained for the ministry. The problem is we just have less kids. So for many years in our synod, our birth rate was always higher than our death rate. So 5 years ago, that inverted. We now have more people passing away than are being born. In fact, last year, less than 3,000 individuals were born into the synod. Traditionally, it's been about 5,000. So if we send about 4% of our kids to Martin Luther College, that means that the enrollment is going to continue to go down. So we have to do different things as a synod. Don't have a solution, it's just that we have to work together for the good of ministry. And Martin Luther College and Luther Preparatory School do that. Incidentally, Luther Preparatory School is embarking on a campaign to build a new music center over there, which is a great thing because they produce a lot of organists. World missions. We've always been strong in world missions as a synod, haven't we? And we celebrate them together because Holy Trinity is just as responsible for world missions as is the administrator, Larry Schlomer. And of course, we have 47 missionary pastors, as when this was written, who work with national pastors to conduct outreach, to conduct training. One of the pastors in this picture, it's hard to see up there, in the center is a gentleman by the name of Nathan Wagenknecht. And Pastor Wagenknecht has been tasked with serving the Native American reservation, developing a new form of ministry for the Native American reservation. And it's funny because I always thought the Native American reservations were home missions because they're in the country, but they're world missions. Why? Because there's a language barrier. So that makes them a world mission. Africa. You know, I can remember going to the WELS grade school and mission money always seemed to be directed to Africa back when I was going to the school. Well, we're in 7 countries and we're looking at opportunities in 16 more countries in Africa for a total of 23. There's 54 countries in Africa. So there's a lot of work to be done. You know, as far as world missions, we're conducting gospel outreach in 46 countries and we're looking at opportunities in 19 more for a total of 65. 195 countries in the world. A lot more work to be done there. Asia, 17 missionaries serve 1.8 billion people. That's 22% of the world population. And 2 of them have been temporarily relocated to Australia to serve the Chinese immigrants in Australia, Pastor Matt Dobler and Pastor Peter Yankee. Latin America, they developed a new form of electronic ministry, I will call it, so people can take classes online, which leads to in-person classes, which ultimately leads to planting churches. So therefore, we're kind of in every Latin American country. And then Europe. There's big, beautiful cathedrals in Europe. Not all of them are acting as churches anymore. Many of them are theaters and museums and so forth. The love of Jesus has grown kind of cold in Europe, but we're still continuing to work hard in London and in Germany to train national pastors and work with other church bodies to proclaim the gospel. We do a lot of this electronically. We have a program called the TEL Network, which stands for Think, Evaluate, Learn, and Lead. It's an opportunity to electronically teach classes to individuals that may be in countries that we're not or may not be able to go. So it's just another form of ministry that we as a synod are embarking upon to spread the gospel. And then home missions. We have a program out there called 110. It means we have a goal of starting 100 new congregations in 10 years and enhancing 75. An enhancement could be a restart or entering into a different form of ministry, adding a pastor, something such as that. But starting new congregations. I just said we were 156 pastors short, yet we're trying to start 100 new congregations in 10 years. Yes. It's imperative that we spread the gospel. I get it that we have a pastor shortage. We need to sometimes work a little bit smarter, but think about this. Right now we have WELS churches positioned so that about 2% of the U.S. population is within about 15 minutes of a WELS church. What if we could make it so that 3% of the U.S. population were within 15 minutes of a WELS congregation? 1 more percent. That would be 3.4 million people who have an opportunity to learn about Jesus. So it's an important initiative. Congregational services, just a brief snippet about them. They work very hard to help congregations be as efficient, as effective as they can. They do a lot of things. They produce ministry resources. They sponsor events like the National Worship Conference, which I saw Pastor Chamber at last year. You were sitting over here, I was sitting over there. But I did see Pastor Chamber there last year. They sponsored the Women's Ministry Conference in Wisconsin, the National Youth Rally in Colorado. Next year's National Youth Rally is going to be in Bowling Green, Ohio. So not that far from here. Christian Aid and Relief, boy, they do a lot in times of disaster. But it's not just disasters that Christian Aid and Relief is active in. They also do a lot with compassion grants. So I'm familiar with a compassion grant for Christ Lutheran Church out in Denver, Colorado, that's resulted in the baptism of 23 Venezuelan migrant children through a Christian Aid and Relief grant. So just another way that we're working hard to spread the gospel. I work for the Ministry of Christian Giving. There are 15 Christian giving counselors that serve WELS all through the country, 14 full-time. Of the 14 full-time, 8 are pastors. 6 of us aren't. 6 of us are laymen who have the opportunity to serve our Lord in a capacity that we never thought that we would. There are Christian giving counselors who are current giving counselors. They're great guys. They help people make gifts to the kingdom now. Deferred Christian giving counselors such as myself help people make gifts that are a little bit more complex or work more on the estate side of it. It's fun to sit around with these guys. 15, 14 of them are great people, and then there's me. Okay, so just a little bit different. But again, I'm a little strange in every way, shape, and form. So WELS, in brief, 1,241 congregations as of the time this was written. We no longer have 330,000 members. As of the end of last year, we had a little under 328,000 members. Our high point was 1990, 421,000 members. So we're down 93,000 members since 1990. Not too many difference in number of pastors, but we kind of have a little bit of a deployment problem in that world. So according to Congregational Services, our decline is going to continue. We're going to continue to decline for at least the next 10 years. But they're cautiously optimistic that all the hard work that Holy Trinity and all of our other congregations are doing, which will result in more adult baptisms, might be the key for the Lord to position the Synod for long-term success. We also still operate one of the largest parochial school systems. I mentioned that I'm first generation WELS because of the school system. 276 elementary schools, 345 early childhood ministries, 29 area Lutheran high schools. Michigan Lutheran High School is down the road. Hope Christian Academy is over in the east side of your state. I went to area Lutheran high school called Shoreland. Do you know we have a virtual Lutheran high school called Amazing Grace Virtual Academy? So individuals can get a WELS high school education and not live anywhere near a WELS high school. So that's a great opportunity. 12 districts in the WELS. Every district operates just a little bit differently for the good of the ministry of their district. You live in the Michigan district. I live in the Southeast Wisconsin district. I also serve the North Atlantic district. WELS is a member of the Confessional Evangelical Lutheran Conference. Well, what's that? Well, it's a conference of 34 church bodies, maybe soon to be 35, that believe exactly the same thing. So while we have 328,000 WELS members in the States, we have about 1 million people worldwide that believe exactly the same thing. We're stronger in numbers. So thank you for letting me talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about Christian giving. Well, the first thing we need to understand is that the Lord owns everything, right? The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Everything that we have is a gift from God. So it makes it a little bit easier to look at it in that perspective. Sorry, I like to drink coffee. By grace, God supplies all our needs, right? So seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So God gives us some management choices, doesn't he? He gives us the resources, and he expects us to manage them for certain goods. One of them, of course, is for our family, to provide for our family. He gives us the assets to take care of our family. But then he also tells what? To go out and evangelize. So I said before that we're either in or actively working at opportunities to evangelize in 65 countries. 195 countries in the world. So that's 1/3 of the population that we do, of the countries that we do get to serve, but there's a lot more that we could be serving. So the work is certainly there. He also expects us to what? To help those that are a little less fortunate than we are. And then, of course, the last one is he expects us to support the government that he's instituted over us. But God desires our thankful response, doesn't he? Each of us should give what they've decided in their heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. Because why? Because God loves a cheerful giver. Remember the story about the guy who went on a trip and said to his servants, "Here's 5 talents, go do something with it." To another servant, "Here's 2 talents, go do something with it." And to another servant, "Here's 1 talent, go do something with it." So the guy went away for a while and came back, and he called the servants together, and the guy he gave 5 to worked and turned it into 10. What did he say? "Well done, good and faithful servant, you did well." And the guy he gave 2 to did what? Turned it into 4. And the master said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But then there was that guy he just gave 1 to. And what did he do with it? Well, he went and buried it in the ground because he was afraid of his master. And the master looked at him and said, "You idiot, you could have at least put it on deposit on the bank. You didn't do with the resources anything with the resources that I gave you." And the Lord expects us to do that. So pillar number 2. So pillar number 1 is remembering that God is the giver of all things and that we are there to manage those resources. Pillar number 2 is to manage your beneficiaries. People miss this a lot, managing their beneficiaries. So let's say, take a real life example. Let's say you and your spouse have 1 kid, just 1, make it simple. And you've decided after prayerful consideration that you really want to split your estate at end of life between your child and ministry. And the ministry is whatever ministry the Lord puts in your heart to do. It could be Holy Trinity, it could be World Missions, it could be whatever. So you've decided to give half of your assets end of life to your kid, half of your assets to ministry. What a blessing. So you go to the attorney and you say, "Mr. Attorney, we want you to set up our will to give in this fashion." Okay, great. You've also got some other assets. So you've got some life insurance policies, some permanent life insurance policies, which means they don't expire. You've named your child as the beneficiary. And you've got some IRAs, or qualified money as we call it, qualified because it's not taxed. All right, so your IRAs and your 401ks and pastors' 403b and municipal employees have 457s. So all these untaxed plans. And you've got those plans, and you named your child as the beneficiary of those plans. So let's say that you have three primary assets. You have your home, valued at about $500,000, and the life insurance is about $500,000, and the IRAs have done well, and they're valued at about $500,000. So your estate's about $1.5 million. What a blessing. The Lord has provided well for you. Great. So you go to the attorney and you write the will up, or a revocable living trust, whatever the attorney works with you on. And 3 weeks after you sign all the papers, the Lord takes you home in a common accident. So a motor vehicle collision. You go home to be with Jesus. How many, you don't have to raise your hands, but in your mind think, is my child going to get half the assets, and is ministry going to get half the assets, the way you've set everything up? The answer is no. The answer is no. So you went to the attorney, you wrote up the will, and the will says, it captures all the assets. So the house was the primary asset into your will, and that's going to get split. $250,000 to your child, $250,000 to ministry. Great. Then the life insurance comes along, and they're going to pay out to the beneficiaries on record. Who did I say the beneficiaries were? Your child. So $500,000 to your child of life insurance monies. And then the IRAs come and say, well, we're going to pay these out too. So we'll look at the beneficiary notices. Oh, you've named your child. Okay, $500,000 to your child. So your child gets $500,000 of life insurance, $500,000 of IRA monies, and $250,000 of half the value of the house. $1,250,000. Ministry gets the other $250,000. You set up your will for your giving plans, but you didn't change the beneficiaries. It's a simple step, frequently missed. So in a minute, we'll talk about what's the best way to give, but it's critically important to remember to change your beneficiaries. Okay, so let's talk about some of the first fruits giving. And I said before, we want to give smarter, right? We don't want to give necessarily more, we want to learn how to give smarter. One of the ways that people give is through cash. Simple, right? Write a check out to Holy Trinity, put it in the collection plate, Holy Trinity can deposit it. Simple. Not always efficient. Why? Because many people can't deduct gifts of cash anymore. The tax laws have changed. Most of us, including my wife and I, don't itemize anymore, which kind of blew my mind. But we don't itemize. Okay, well, we don't give gifts to the kingdom for tax benefits. We give gifts to the kingdom to support the kingdom. But if there's a tax benefit, we absolutely want to take advantage of it. And because most of us don't itemize, cash doesn't always work. There's some other ways to work with that we can talk about. You can bunch your gifts. At the end of the year, you can give next year's gifts. But if you fail to tell the treasurer that, hey, this is my giving for next year, they're going to look at it and say, oh, great, we've got this great end-of-year gift. Now we can support, whatever project in front of us. And then all of a sudden, next year, you're not meeting the budget numbers because the income's not there from that person because they gave it in the year before. But appreciated assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, other assets that have gone up in value. When you cash them out, and again, I'm not a tax expert, but what happens when you cash these appreciated assets out? You get to pay what? Capital gains tax, right? Right now it's 15% on long-term assets. You pay capital gains tax. But if you give that asset to ministry, they don't pay tax. So they get the full value of the gift. And you know what? You get the full tax deduction without having to take those capital gains tax. So it's a smarter way to give, just through appreciated assets. Okay, IRA charitable distributions. This is a large, large opportunity for congregations. I mentioned before about IRAs. We talked about them, and why is it such an opportunity for congregations? Because ministries don't pay taxes on the monies that they receive. So when you're 70 and a half, not 70.49, you have to be 70 and a half or older, you can give from your IRA to ministry. Why would you want to do that? Again, ministries don't pay taxes, but you're also not paying taxes on that money either. Now, you don't get a tax benefit for it, but you never pay taxes on it in the first place. So some people will give from their IRA and then take the money that they had in their budget for giving purposes and live on it. Because they gave to the kingdom through their IRAs. You can do that at 70 and a half. We have a lot of WELS members that are 70 and a half. The Lord has gifted a lot of us because the market's been pretty strong lately and our IRA values are pretty strong. Maybe not in the last 2 months, but before that, the markets have been very strong and there's a lot of value in IRAs. So now, at age 73, you have to take money out of your IRAs. It's not, I should take it out. You have to. It's a formula. It's based on life expectancy, okay? But you have to take money out of your IRA. So your custodian will provide a number to you that says, based upon this balance at this date, you have to take this much out this year. If you don't take it out, there's a penalty. So you have to take it out. It's taxable when you take it out. But, again, you can use those IRAs to give to ministry and satisfy those what's called required minimum distributions. So what a great opportunity. You can even use those IRA monies to put it into annuity, which we'll talk about before, and spread out that income to yourself and then still leave a gift to ministry. So I'm going to pause for just a second to see if anybody has any questions on what we've talked about so far. It gives me a chance to drink some more coffee. No questions? All right. And that's why I do like to meet with people while I'm here, because then we can talk about your specific situation in more detail, in a more private fashion. So wills and trusts. You know, a lot of people will use their will or their revocable living trust to make a gift to ministry, right? You don't know what you're going to need during your life. The Lord has given it to you to take care of your family. That's great. But at the end of life, you know, you don't really need it anymore. In fact, Pastor Chamber, I'm not sure you've ever seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer because we just don't need those assets anymore, right? So a lot of people will set up a gift through their will or the revocable living trust. You can do it in a couple different ways. You can give a percentage of your estate, and that's really the most frequent, by the way. People will say, well, I have 3 kids, so I'm going to give 25% to each of my kids and 25% to ministry. We actually call that kids plus Jesus, by the way, or specific amounts. Maybe I want to leave $250,000 in an endowment to Holy Trinity. Okay, and then what's left, I'll use percentages to give to my 3 kids. That's another way to give. Residual. You know, after everybody's received what I want them to have, the amount that's left in my estate will go to ministry. Or contingent. You know, if one of my children pass away before I do, their amount will go to ministry. Or trusts. Trusts are another way to set up income for especially kids who, you know, mom and dad still have to pay for some of their support needs. So wills and trusts, a great way to plan for giving at the end of life. And I do a lot of work with folks in that realm. So I said before that these retirement assets, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s are all taxable when we take them out. There's really no way to take money out of these accounts without it being taxable to you or to your heirs. Again, the only way for it not to be taxable is to give it to ministry. So we encourage people to be smarter when they make end-of-life gifts, to use what we call these qualified funds, these IRA or these retirement plans, use that to give to ministry. Make that the first gift you give to ministry. And then use the other assets, such as your home, and the other assets that step up in value to give to your heirs. So that's just a smart way to plan your end-of-life gift. People say, well, I'll give from this account, or I'll use my life insurance. Well, okay, but remember what we talked about before? I'll go back, if I can. We talked about the beneficiaries. Well, if in this case, if you would have just changed the beneficiaries on your IRA, 401k to ministry, what would that done to that? What would that have done to your end-of-life gift? Well, remember the house got split in half. Kids got $250,000, ministry got $250,000. Kids get that life insurance. Okay, $500,000 to the kids, so that's $750,000. But now you've changed the IRA beneficiaries to ministry, whatever ministry it is, Holy Trinity, Martin Luther College, the SEM, missions, whatever. You've changed it to ministry. So now ministry gets $500,000 of qualified IRA money, $250,000 from the house for $750,000. Your child gets $500,000 of life insurance and $250,000 from the house, $750,000, split right down the middle. You've given the gifts of qualified assets to ministry, which is the best way to do it, and those other assets to your child. A smart way to give, but people don't always think about that. I've seen a lot of people who've structured their end-of-life documents, well, I want to give it to my heirs. That's great, it's a blessing. But so many people say, my kids don't need it. Okay, then let's talk about different ways you can support them and ministries moving forward. So, payable on death, transfer and death designations. You might be able to work with your financial institution to label your accounts so that they can bypass probate and go to your heirs or to go to ministry. That's another effective way to do that. I said before about life insurance. And again, I'm not a life insurance agent in Michigan, but life insurance is kind of fun in some ways. You can use life insurance to just change a beneficiary and give it to ministry. Real life example, in my case, my wife is a fair amount older than I am. So if my wife passes before I do and I've got a permanent policy with a company, I could choose to change the beneficiary designation to give to ministry. People can give a policy that's got a cash value to ministry, and after an appraisal, maybe get a tax deduction. Or some people can even buy a life insurance policy and just give it to ministry and maybe get a tax deduction for those premiums. So life insurance works well, but it's the kind of vehicle that we recommend directing that to your heirs. It's not taxable for income tax purposes, so it's a great gift to your heirs. Charitable gift annuities. All right, so these are some of the more, I don't want to say complex, but some of the different ways that we can give to ministry. A charitable gift annuity is just an opportunity to set up an annuity where you and your spouse get an income for the rest of your lives, but then at the end of that period, when both of you go home to be with Jesus, the amount that's left goes to ministry. So think about it. You and your wife, or husband, can have an income for the rest of your lives, guaranteed not to outlive you. And then when you pass away, whatever's left goes to ministry. So it's kind of giving it twice, right? So that's one way that we can work with people to achieve their giving plans. Some people can purchase annuities as young as 45 and just kind of save them, let them sit there. And at some point wake up and say, you know what, it's time for me to retire. Great, let's turn them on. They've grown in value. You and your spouse get an income. The gift to ministry is a wonderful part of that. So charitable gift annuities. Again, that's why I wanted to set up opportunities to talk to as many people as I can now or later to talk about some of these things to see if they might have to work in your estate plans. Charitable remainder trusts. A little bit bigger vehicle. An annuity is a $10,000 minimum, not that much. Charitable remainder trusts, a little larger. $200,000 is minimum. But boy, we can do a lot with charitable remainder trusts. So take an example, you've got that hunting land. You don't hunt anymore. So it just sort of sits there. Your wife's like, oh, you got to go up there again and take care of the place. Great, I get it. Well, you don't want it anymore, but it's still sitting there. Well, some folks can say, let's give it to ministry. Okay, let's give it to ministry. By doing that, you and your wife get 5 or 6% a year of that land value after it's sold for the rest of your lives. And you know what? You can even give the kids 20 years of income for 5 or 6% after that. So this works out as a wonderful gift to Kingdom because selling these lands, capital gains tax. Giving it to ministry spreads out that capital gains tax. Doesn't eliminate it, but it spreads it out. Gives an income to you and your spouse for the rest of your lives, and then even your kids for 20 years after that. My wife and I are blessed to have a home in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, and I can tell you, I love my place in Minocqua. I love my place, but there's maintenance involved, and it's like, oh, the power goes out, or this goes out, or this has to be done. I was mentioning before to one of the gals in the back, remember when the Gaylord got those ice storms like 2 months ago? Gaylord, Michigan, they had those terrible ice storms. We got the same ice storms in Wisconsin. Knocked my power out for 14 hours. My Generac generator ran. Power came back on, knocked it out again, ran for 40 hours. So 54 hours. So you got to worry about these things. So I get it. There's a worry to it, but it is a tremendous blessing. So a legacy charitable remainder trust. We call it a give it twice trust. What a great way to work with gifts to ministry of qualified monies, of those monies that haven't been taxed, those IRA monies, those 401k monies, things that we've talked about already. Giving it to your kids is what? Taxable to them, right? Again, there's no way to get money out of an IRA without paying taxes unless you give it to ministry. But if it's your desire to give it to your heirs, What a blessing, but they have to take it over 10 years. They can take it all in year 1, they can take it all in year 10, they can take it equally. If you're getting an income from it, there might be some changing in how they have to take it, but still, by the end of that 10th year, those funds have to be withdrawn and taxes paid. Okay, so if you and your spouse live to a normal life expectancy of your 70s or 80s, your kids are probably going to be in their 50s or 60s, likely doing well. Well, now mom and dad are going to give them a blessing of a whole lot more untaxed money. That's not going to make their tax situation any better. It's going to make it a little worse. Okay, it's still a blessing. So we work with folks to set up a legacy charitable remainder trust. So these monies go into the trust at the death of mom and dad. When the second one goes home to be with Jesus, these IRA monies go into the trust. The kids now get 5 or 6% a year for not 10 years, but 20. So they spread out that tax gain. So it makes it a little bit more palatable. And then the cool thing is, at the end of those 20 years, whatever's left, and it's usually substantial, is a nice gift to ministry. So we call it give it twice. You give it to your kids, and then at the end of those 20 years, you give it to ministry. So it's a blessing. Again, guys, it's just ways to give smarter. Not a big change, just ways to give smarter. A lot of people will set these up. Again, I just mentioned, it's at the death of the second. So if you need those assets for whatever care that you have, great, they're there. But if you don't need those assets, when the second of you goes home to be with Jesus, then the trust is funded. Donor advised funds. So I said before that cash is great, but it's not always very efficient. So some people will choose to use a donor advised fund. It's an irrevocable gift to a fund that, because you've made a larger gift, you might get a tax deduction for, but then you can specify distributions from that fund for years. So maybe you give 3-4 years of giving to Holy Trinity at one time to the donor advised fund, and then specify monthly or quarterly distributions to Holy Trinity. At least you've possibly gotten a tax deduction for it. So donor advised funds. And then endowments. I love endowments. It's the give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. Endowments pay out 4%. 4%, but they pay it out year after year after year after year. So every year, the fund pays out 4%, the market acts on it, and next year it pays out 4%. Remember I said before that you've got this legacy charitable remainder trust or a charitable gift annuity. It leaves an end-of-life gift to ministry. Some people will say, well, let's make that end-of-life gift ministry an endowment. So think about it. Say your legacy charitable remainder trust leaves a balance of $500,000 at the end of those 20 years, which is not unusual. $500,000, 4%, $20,000 a year. What you're giving to Holy Trinity? Well, okay, this will replace my giving to Holy Trinity perpetually. So why should your giving stop when you're going to be with Jesus? Like, that's probably the most important time, because now you've achieved the goal of your salvation, you're with your Lord, and you're still continuing to fund ministry back on this earth, so Pastor Chamber and others like him can proclaim the truth of Jesus to a world that desperately needs to hear it. So endowments, it's a great way to fund gifts in a long-term fashion. So what's the best for your goals? Well, let's sit down and talk about it. Have you looked at your will lately? Have you looked at your revocable living trust? Is it sitting in the filing cabinet? Does it have a half inch of dust on it because you haven't looked at it in a period of time? It's good to look at these things about every 5 years. You want to make sure that it's still doing what you want it to do. Just take a look at it. And remember I said before, this kids plus Jesus thing, a lot of people will like to split their giving so that they split their estate, with their kids plus one more. So 4 kids, they split their estate 5 ways. 20% to each heir and 20% to ministry. Pillar number 4. So any questions on what we talked about up there? Boy, you guys are quiet. Even Pastor Chambers quiet. Okay. Yeah, it is unusual. Document your plans. If we used to say in emergency medical services, if you didn't write it down, you didn't do it. Okay? You need to document your plans. Because if you don't document your plans, who's going to make the decisions? The state of Michigan is going to make the decisions through their courts and so forth of how these assets are applied. They may not be the decisions you want made. And plus, we have to worry about guardians, trustees, personal reps. If you're younger and you have kids, or maybe grandkids, but that you're watching, but if you have kids, boy, it's important that you name who you want to watch those kids after you pass away. Maybe you and your spouse have decided, yeah, my sister's and her husband, that's where the kids are going. But the courts may think that your brother and his wife, who haven't set foot in a church for 20 years, might be the best place. You got to write these things down so that it's known. And personal rep, again, who's going to make the decisions to administer your estate? The person you want, or the person that the court sets up, who they may have to assign a bond to on top of everything. So you gotta make these decisions known. Consider the special needs of beneficiaries. Well, I said before, children. So we encourage people with children to set up a trust, a child trust, and fund it with assets, and we can talk about that offline, but to make sure that it's fully funded so that the trust has a value there to take care of all the needs that you were going to have to provide for your children and if you would have been here, including high school costs, college costs, and whatever else. So we encourage people to set up a trust so that their kids are taken care of. Special needs, working with your legal professional to make sure that you set up your estate if you have an individual with special needs so that they maximize the benefits to that person and can make sure they're taken care of for the rest of their life. Spendthrift. You love your brother. He's a great guy. But this guy can't manage money for anything. So in aiming to giving him a large sum of money at the end of your life, while it's a great blessing, may not accomplish the purposes that you want it to accomplish. So maybe using a vehicle that spreads it out over time is a more appropriate fashion for your brother. Or well-to-do, some people don't need the additional funds. It's good to think about these things up front. Tax issues we talked about. Most people don't have to pay federal estate tax. It's right around $13 million per person right now. Most people don't hit that threshold. Some do. We don't have to worry about that for the most part. But boy, deferred income taxes, those qualified monies, guys, they're called ticking time bombs because they're going to result in taxation one way or another. Again, the only way to avoid it is to use those to give to ministry and make sure the other aspects of your estate go to your heirs. Be prepared for incapacity. We don't just write end-of-life documents for end of life. We also work with our professionals to make sure that we have healthcare power of attorneys for finance and healthcare. Your spouse will make those decisions for you now. What if you and your spouse are in a common accident and you can't make those decisions for each other? You need to specify these things up front so that it's known. And hospitals are going to ask for these things. Who's your healthcare power of attorney? So working with your professional will help set this up ahead of time because, again, you want the person making your decisions to be the person you want making your decisions, not somebody else. So what next? Everybody's got a folder. If you don't, Pastor's got a couple more. There's a form in there. I would love for you to fill it out and get it back to me. Even if it's just to say you had a suggestion and how I can make this better. If there's something that I can do to help you offline, I'm happy to chat about it. I'm here for the next couple of days. We can find a time. If not, we can talk afterwards. So I would appreciate the feedback. Remember King Hezekiah, God sent his pastor, the prophet Isaiah, to Hezekiah and say, you know what? You're going to die. And Hezekiah said, I'm 39 years old. I don't want to die. So he prayed to the Lord, I don't want to die. So God said to Isaiah, go back and tell him, fine, I'll give him 15 more years. So Hezekiah got another chance. We don't know if we have that chance. So it's kind of now's the time, guys. All right. I went through a lot. We stopped for a little bit in between, but what questions do you guys have? Oh, come on, you can't be that quiet. So I'm not an insurance agent, Fred, but that's a good question, long-term care. You've got to check with your insurance agents on that one. And I really don't know Michigan law when it comes to that. But what he was talking about is long-term care, that's for end of life. And again, I'm not an insurance agent in Michigan, but it's for if you're incapacitated, need care beyond normal care. Okay, you can protect the long-term care with a protection trust. And again, that's something that I want you to talk to the experts on. Okay. Okay. Okay, well, that's a good concept. Yep. And elder law attorneys are good for that. Excellent, good point. Other questions? Pastor, you've got to have something that came through your mind as we were doing this. I'll put you on the spot. Anything I can make more clear? Get her done. Okay. Right.
And your Roth type stuff for giving to your heirs, although they still have the 10-year thing. And that be also put into the trust for the 20-year.
Generally, we recommend for the legacy charitable remainder trust to make that the qualified assets. So say you want to give a gift to ministry, use the qualified assets first. Whatever qualified assets are left after that gift of ministry would be made, then we would suggest that go into a legacy charitable remainder trust, but still keeping it on the qualified IRA side of it. Because you're right, Roth IRAs are a little bit different vehicle. They're already taxed. Still some limitations with Roths, but again, the biggest thing is they're already taxed. Good, very good point though. That was excellent. What else, guys? Anything else I can answer or make more clear? So in your folder, there's the Christian estate planning for the Christian steward document. Boy, I really encourage you to take that and just kind of look through it when you get an opportunity. You know, it talks about all the different ways to make sure that your estate is the way you want it. Your plans are in place. Again, I'm kind of strange. Every January 1st, I look forward to getting up and going to the computer and starting to get all the values on our account so I can do a personal financial statement as of year end. That way we know from year to year exactly, you know, where our asset base is gone. But look through it. It talks about funeral plans. Pastor, how many times have you had families come to you and say, I have no idea what mom wanted for her hymns at her funeral? Yeah, so writing them down ahead of time is a great idea. And this document will help you do that. So go through that in your leisure. It's a great document.
Unless your parents are like my mom, and she had 2 lists of funeral hymns, and each of them was 10 hymns long.
Okay.
My sister and I said, sorry, Mom, you don't get 20 hymns for your funeral. But we'll pick from your 2 lists.
There you go. So you probably tick 3, 4, 5. So 4. Okay, so 20% of her list. What else, guys? What else can I make clear? Yes, ma'am. Okay. 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 That's a great observation. I've never had somebody say that one before. Excellent observation. Never would have thought about that. So that's a great point. They are very expensive, like, you know, $10,000, $15,000, and it adds up quick. And they also have these non-declinable charges. I know that my brother passed away a couple years ago. You know, this is non-declinable, this is non-declinable, this is non-declinable. Okay. So, good point. What else? Guys, has this been helpful? Yeah. Gave you some things to think about? Like I say, my name is, contact information is in the folder. If we're not meeting, let me know if there's anything I can answer for you. Throw me an email. That's wonderful. I appreciate it. Anything else? Yes. Ma'am. Oh, the presentation? It is a lot of information. That's a good point. Okay. Oh, so it's in archives? Oh.
Yep, it'll be on the live stream page. I
In fact, I hope to sit down with some of your congregational leaders, and we'll talk about that booklet in more detail, and we'll talk about a planned giving program so that you guys have some folks to work with on kind of a grassroots level too. All right. Please, anything else for questions that I can address? I appreciate your opportunity to talk to you this morning and to serve you. Thank you for that. Pat, thank you. Pastor, is there anything else that you would want to say? Or
Nope. Good to go.
can we close with the blessing?
We can.
You want me to give the blessing?
Go ahead.
The grace of our Lord and Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.